She was thrown out by her husband for being infertile. Then a single dad CEO said, "Come with me." The November wind cut through the deserted New York streets like an invisible blade, carrying a chill that didn't just touch the skin, it burrowed deep into the bones and settled there. Streetlights flickered above wet sidewalks, casting long, weary shadows across the concrete. On a cracked wooden bench beside an empty bus stop, a young woman sat curled in on herself, knees drawn tightly to her chest, arms wrapped thinly around her body, as if she could somehow protect herself from more than just the cold. Her coat, fraying around the seams, barely covered her elbows. Each shallow breath came out as a faint cloud in the night air. In her shaking hands, she clutched a small, tarnished locket. The chain was delicate, almost worn to thread. Her mother's, the last real tie to something that had once felt safe. Her name was Elena Moore. Lately, it didn't feel like it belonged to her anymore. Not since the moment her husband spat it at her like a stain. Useless, broken, barren. The words still rang, sharp as glass in the back of her mind. He'd pushed her out of the house and locked the door before she could even process it. That had been 2 nights ago, or maybe 3. Time blurred when pain outweighed sleep. She hadn't eaten. She hadn't truly rested. A cheap bus ticket had pulled her across state lines. And then, with nowhere to go, she'd walked until her legs couldn't carry her anymore. Someone at a highway rest stop stole her bag. Everything she had left. Now she sat alone in the dark. Empty, not just in her stomach, but somewhere deeper. No one looked twice at her. No one slowed their car. In a city full of millions, she had never felt more unseen. Her fingers pressed the locket open. Inside was a tiny, faded photo. Her mother holding her as a child. She didn't cry. She couldn't waste the energy. Tears had stopped coming hours ago. But what she didn't know was that just a street away, someone else was awake tonight. A man who rarely slept, because when he closed his eyes, the past still found him. His name was Matthew Hayes, CEO of Hayes & Carter Holdings, 38 years old, widowed, father of 3. Most people only knew the first part of that description, and even that from afar. In business magazines, he was the reserved, strategic billionaire. In the boardroom, he was the man whose silence made executives nervous. But beyond all that was a tired father who still stopped to pack lunch for his oldest child before leaving the house each morning. He had just wrapped up another late meeting at the company's secondary office nearby. He almost never walked this way home, but construction had blocked his usual route. The night was too cold, even for New York in November. He adjusted his scarf and kept walking, his breath visible in faint misty bursts. That's when he noticed her. At first, she looked like another shadow, just a small figure curled on a bench, but something about the stillness of her body, the way she held herself like she was trying to vanish, caught his attention. Not pity, something quieter, something that came from knowing what it felt like when life stops, giving you space to breathe. He slowed. He shouldn't interfere. People had their own lives, their own battles, but just as he moved past her, a faint metallic sound reached him. He turned slightly. She had dropped the locket. Her fingers scrambled in the dark, trembling as she reached down, panic in the movement, that motion of someone terrified to lose. Something small because it was the only thing left. Made him pause for real. Matthew stepped quietly toward her. She tensed, eyes lifting slowly. Under the dim light, her face appeared pale, streaked with exhaustion. She flinched at first, as if expecting harshness. He didn't speak immediately. He simply picked up the locket and held it out. Her voice was almost not there. "Thank you." Matthew nodded once. "Are you waiting for a bus?" I don't know," her voice cracked. "I just needed somewhere to sit." He looked at her coat, at the way her shoulders shook. He glanced around, empty streets, snow beginning to drift lightly. She had no bag, no plan, no shield from the night. "You're freezing," he said calmly. "You won't make it through the night like this." She didn't answer. Her eyes lowered to the ground. For a few seconds, he weighed silence. He didn't usually step into other people's tragedy, but something in this felt familiar, like a memory of when he stood outside a hospital years ago, holding his wife's belongings in a paper bag, wondering how he would explain to his children why she wasn't coming home. He extended his hand, not forceful, just steady. "If you don't have anywhere to go, come with me." Eleanor didn't move. She searched his eyes, like she was scared this was some kind of cruel trick. "Why?" she whispered. "Because no one should be alone in weather like this," he replied. Then softer, so quiet it almost wasn't heard. "Especially when life has already been cold enough." Her fingers hesitated, then slowly reached out, and for the first time in days, something inside her shifted. Not warmth, not yet, but the faintest possibility of it. Elena's hand hovered over his for a second longer than necessary, her hesitation clear. Trust wasn't something she could hand out freely, not after what trust had cost her. But the cold was relentless, and the exhaustion weighing on her was beyond physical. So, she let her fingertips brush against his palm. Matthew didn't grip tightly. He didn't pull. He simply supported her as she rose, unsteady on her feet. Her legs trembled from more than just the cold, and for a moment she nearly collapsed back onto the bench. He reacted quickly, placing a stabilizing hand at her elbow. "Careful," he said. "Not stern, just steady." She nodded, not meeting his gaze. The two began walking slowly along the sidewalk. Light snow drifted across their path, gathering in the cracks of the pavement. He removed his black wool coat without a word and settled it over her shoulders. It was still warm. She gasped softly at the sudden contrast against her icy skin. "You'll freeze without it," she murmured. "I'm fine," he replied without looking at her. "Keep it on." A lie, perhaps. The wind immediately bit through his suit jacket, but he didn't flinch. He guided her gently toward the sleek black SUV parked near a lamppost. The driver wasn't there. Matthew preferred to drive himself late at night. Less small talk, more thinking space. He opened the passenger door. She hesitated again. She glanced at the car interior, pristine leather, quiet luxury. Then at her hands, dirty, cracked, trembling. "I don't want to ruin anything," she whispered. "You won't," he said simply. "Get in." Something in his voice, firm but not forceful, made her comply. She settled inside slowly, clutching the locket against her chest. He closed the door softly and walked around, sliding into the driver's seat. The car started with a quiet hum, the heater immediately kicking in. Warm air began filling the space. Still, Eleanor shivered. Not from cold, from uncertainty. She looked at him. "Why are you being kind to me?" He didn't answer immediately. His eyes were focused on the road. Snowflakes landed on the windshield, melting beneath the wipers. Finally, he said, "Because sometimes someone has to be." She looked down, processing that. Silence filled the car for several minutes. Not uncomfortable, just silence. Matthew had never believed in forcing words. Eventually she spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "Do you always help strangers at midnight?" "No," he replied. "Only when they look like they've forgotten they deserve help." Her throat tightened. She turned her gaze toward the window. Buildings passed by quietly. Neon signs reflected against icy glass. Somewhere far above, the moon tried to break through thick clouds. After a while, she asked softly, "Where are we going?" "To my home," he said. "You're not sleeping on a bench in this weather." She instinctively reacted. I can't." "You can," he said calmly. "You will. It's not charity. It's safety. Nothing more," she wanted to argue. Pride stirred inside her, though it was fragile. But the truth was simple. She had nowhere else to go. And something about him, something in the calm, restraint of his voice, didn't feel threatening. If anything, it felt protected. They drove in quiet for about 20 minutes. Eventually, the scenery shifted. The city sidewalks gave way to a gated residential area. Snow lay undisturbed on spacious lawns. The car approached a large modern house. Glass, stone, warm lights glowing softly from inside. As they pulled into the driveway, Eleanor's chest tightened. She looked at him. "You live here?" "Yes." "This is your home?" He nodded once. "Ours," he added quietly, then clarified. "Mine, and my children's." That word brought a faint light to her eyes. "Children?" "3," he said as he turned off the engine. "Aged 13, 8, and 6. So young," she whispered. "So loud," he replied with a hint of dry humor for the first time tonight. She almost smiled. Almost. He stepped out of the car and opened her door. As she stood again, wrapped in his coat, the reality of where she was settled in, her husband's cruel voice echoed in her head. Broken, worthless, and now, here she was, about to walk into the home of a billionaire CEO who had offered her warmth without asking anything in return. He led her up the stone steps. The front door opened quietly with a fingerprint lock. Warmth immediately greeted them from within. The house wasn't extravagant in the way she expected. Yes, it was large, elegant, but not showy. It felt lived in, cozy despite its modern architecture. In the foyer, a staircase led upward. To the left, a living area with a fireplace burning gently. Toys were scattered neatly near a shelf. Children's shoes near the mat. Elena's gaze softened. "This way," Matthew said, guiding her gently toward the guest suite down a quiet hallway. He opened the door to a spacious room, soft bed, fresh linens, a lamp casting warm amber light. There are fresh towels in the bathroom, he said. Take a shower, get warm. I'll have something brought up to eat. She turned to him slowly. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me. He looked at her for a prolonged moment. Not with pity, but with recognition. No, he said quietly. But I recognize what your eyes look like when someone says you have nothing left. Her breath hitched. Rest, he continued. We'll talk in the morning. You're safe here. Safe. That word landed somewhere deep within her, and for the first time in days, tears finally reached her eyes. Thank you, she whispered, barely audible. He nodded once and stepped back, leaving the door slightly open. A gesture, not closed off, not trapped, just there. Elena stood still for a few seconds, then slowly walked toward the bathroom. She turned on the light, looked at herself in the mirror. Her reflection was rough, dark circles, dried blood on her lower lip, hair a tangled mess. She touched the sink, steadying herself. Then very slowly, she allowed a single tear to fall. Just one, but it was enough. She closed the bathroom door gently, clutching the locket in her palm. Outside, Matthew stood for a moment longer in the hallway. His eyes closed briefly. Then he walked toward the living room, where a small nightlight glowed beside framed pictures of his children. He looked at them. Then almost quietly, to himself, he muttered, "No one deserves to be left out in the cold." Morning light crept gently through the tall windows of the guest suite, painting the room in soft gold. Elena stirred beneath the blankets, her body sore but warm, her chest still tight with the memory of the previous night. The locket felt heavy in her hand, not with weight, but with something she hadn't felt in a long time. A tether to safety. She moved slowly, rising from the bed. The bathroom mirror reflected a face that looked almost human again. No longer just hollow eyes and trembling lips, but someone who had slept, if only a little, and survived. She touched the locket, and for the first time, allowed herself a whisper of hope. Maybe things can change. The door opened softly behind her. Matthew stepped in, holding 2 mugs of coffee, one steaming black, the other with a hint of cream. He moved with the careful, quiet precision of someone who had learned to navigate both the chaos of business and the delicate lives of 3 young children. Good morning, he said, offering her the mug. Coffee? She nodded, hesitating before taking it. Her hands shook slightly, not from cold, but from the weight of reality. Thank you, she said again quietly. You don't have to thank me, he replied. I just don't like the idea of someone starting their day hungry and cold, or scared. Elena took a tentative sip. Warmth spread slowly from her mouth to her chest, a contrast to the icy emptiness that had lingered for days. She set the mug down, eyes meeting his. There was a quiet question in her gaze, an unspoken, why me? Matthew leaned against the doorway, the morning sun catching the sharp lines of his face. Because sometimes life leaves people in the street, and sometimes someone just needs to be noticed before the world moves on without them. The words weren't dramatic, but they carried weight. They made her feel seen in a way she hadn't allowed herself to feel in months. She swallowed, unsure how to answer. A small noise interrupted them, a soft giggle, then the scuff of bare feet across hardwood. 3 pairs of curious eyes peeked around the corner. Matthew's children. Each held a small, mismatched toy, observing her with tentative caution. Daddy, the oldest whispered, his tone equal parts curiosity and caution. Matthew turned toward them, his face softening. Go back to your breakfast, he said gently, not scolding. This is just someone I'm helping. You'll meet her soon. The children lingered a moment longer, watching her. Elena smiled faintly, a reflexive gesture of politeness more than comfort. One small hand waved, and the youngest, a girl of 6 with dark curls, gave a shy nod before returning to the kitchen. Matthew glanced back at Elena. They'll warm up. Kids are usually honest before they get cautious. Elena exhaled, feeling the tension in her chest loosen fractionally. You live here with all 3 of them? She asked softly. Yes, he replied. Since my wife passed, it's been my job to make sure they have stability. Some days it's easier, some days it's harder. His voice dropped slightly, almost confessional. But it's worth it. She looked down at the coffee in her hands, feeling small in the presence of someone who carried so much and still had room for another person. I don't. I've never met someone like you, she admitted, who helps strangers for no reason, who cares about kids and strangers alike. Matthew's lips curved faintly, a hint of humor that didn't quite reach his eyes. I've made enough mistakes in life to know that sometimes the right thing isn't about reason. It's about doing it anyway. Elena considered that. Her own life had been full of expectations, of judgment, of cruel words. And now, in this quiet morning light, with this man and his children, life seemed to offer a possibility she hadn't thought existed anymore. Breakfast arrived shortly after, a simple spread, but carefully prepared. Scrambled eggs, toast, fruit. Elena ate slowly, each bite a reminder that she could nourish herself again, that someone had thought to make her comfortable. Matthew watched quietly, letting her space, occasionally asking questions that were gentle and unobtrusive. After a while, Elena set her fork down. She felt awkward, almost embarrassed by the comfort she had received. I don't even know your name, she said softly. Matthew, he said. Matthew Hayes. And you are Elena Moore, she replied. Matthew nodded. Well, Elena, welcome to temporary stability. His tone carried the faintest hint of a joke. She couldn't help but smile, small, tentative, but real. Temporary. For now, he said. Life's unpredictable, but you don't have to face it alone. There was a pause, and then Elena asked, hesitating, Why? Why help me? You barely know me. Matthew studied her for a long moment. Because everyone deserves a chance to recover, to breathe, to survive the storm long enough to find something better. Her eyes lingered on his. She saw no pity, no judgment, only understanding and perhaps care. The morning passed quietly, the children slowly warming to her presence. By the time the sun had fully risen, Elena had shared small stories of her past, of her family, of the husband who had thrown her away. She didn't cry. Matthew listened, responding occasionally, offering perspective but never rushing her. It was a rhythm she hadn't known she needed. Quiet acknowledgement, gentle support, space to process without pressure. By afternoon, a realization began to settle in her chest. She could survive. She could exist outside the shadow of cruelty. And for the first time in months, she could imagine a life that included hope. Matthew noticed the shift, subtle as it was. When he left her for a brief meeting in the study, he returned to find her sitting near the window, locket in hand, staring out at the snow-covered garden. You're thinking, he said softly. Elena turned, startled. I guess I am. Good, he replied. Thinking is where recovery starts. She smiled faintly, then set the locket down. Matthew, I don't know what to say, or how to thank you. You don't have to, he said. Just take this moment, breathe, live, that's thanks enough. And in that moment, Elena felt a quiet shift inside her. The weight of abandonment, the echoes of cruel words, began to lift, not completely, but enough for her to step forward. Matthew hadn't just saved her from the cold streets. He'd saved her from believing that the world had nothing left to offer. Later, as she helped the children with a small art project, she laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. The sound was soft, hesitant, but genuine. Matthew watched from the doorway, blurred in the background, yet fully present. He didn't interfere, didn't offer praise. He simply observed. Elena realized that survival wasn't just about shelter, food, or safety. It was about trust, connection, and the subtle human moments that reminded you. Someone sees you, someone cares, and sometimes that someone could change everything. By the end of the day, Elena knew she would face her challenges, but now she had something she hadn't had before, a chance to stand again, to rebuild, to believe in small kindnesses that led to profound changes. Matthew caught her gaze across the room. A faint smile tugged at his lips. She smiled back. No words were needed. Outside, the snow continued to fall gently, covering the city in white. Inside, warmth, laughter, and quiet recovery filled the spaces where fear had once ruled. And for Elena Moore, it was the first true day of a new beginning.